Welcome to Pirate Living Podcast. We are your hosts, Karan and Kristen. On this podcast, we are highlighting ordinary people living extraordinary lives. These are pirates who take small, bold actions daily to create social change. Pirate life is all about rebelling and breaking the rules for good. Creating lasting social change starts by first breaking our inner rules. After all, the hardest rules to break are your own. The pirates we highlight have dedicated themselves to creating good trouble. Today, we are sitting down with Lefteris Heretakis, a designer and lecturer at IE University. Lefteris is a host of Designer Talks podcast, as well as the Design Education Talks podcast. And if you've read the book, How to Be More Pirate, you will have read about how this pirate has been creating change in the art and design education from within the system. So welcome, Lefteris. We're happy that you could join us today, all the way from Spain.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So you have been creating change within the art and design education and shaking up the status quo. So will you tell us what started you on your own pirate journey and brought you to where you are today?
Absolutely. Well, when I started teaching about 12 years ago, I realized that things were very different to how things were when I was a student, and that the students were getting less and less and less when they need to be getting more. So I started looking into it, and I realized that I wasn't the one that was, crazy, but actually the system was giving students less and asking for more, basically. So I went on a large journey doing research into design education. And I compared systems of many countries and many schools around the world. And then I said, okay, I'm going to start. And I'm going to start by gathering a group of like-minded individuals so we can work together and create something that hopefully one day will become physical. So after this effort, in 2019, I created the first design education forum in Alicante, and it was physical just before COVID. It was fantastic. There was 450 people. So it started as an idea with no funding, gathered support, and I had help, and people came from all over the world to have an honest conversation about art and design education in a practical way. And actually, this gathering. In November 2019 is what was the idea behind Design Education Talks podcast, because I wanted something to continue the conversation, not just have the conversation once a year. So Design Education Talks podcast came along, and then of course it's been the Design Education Forum has been going every year, and it was the second forum was virtual again. The third forum this year is just about to happen on the 11th and 12th of November. And that is again virtual for this year. Hopefully next year we'll be going blended. But it's really about the fact that things in art and design education has been getting more theoretical. The students have less access to physical materials, to workshops, to 24-hour studios. And of course, the pandemic has also been an excuse to give students even less than before. Mm-hmm. So I'm on this journey to give students more.
Interesting. Yeah. So when you said that the students were getting less and less, I'd love to know more about what is that more that you're giving the students, and what's the impact of that?
Of course. I mean, the idea is to build a curriculum around practice, and basically to give students opportunities to realize that in order to learn what is digital, because many times the digital environment is a simulation of the physical. Mm-hmm. So also to experiment with the physical as much as they can get, and pushing the boundaries, of course, within that system all the time. Mm-hmm. In a world that's getting paperless and wireless, we also have to continue to remember the fact that we are physical as well. Mm-hmm. And every chance is that we must go back to the physical, as well as, of course, experience digital fully. I've been with computers for many decades, and I'm very much into technology, and I love technology. But to fully experience technology, we must also experience our physicality.
Would you say it's a return to more traditional styles then, or teaching?
It's a return to practice based, because a lot of education right now is teaching swimming from books, and it's very dangerous. When you teach you swimming from a book, you get your BA honors in swimming, then you get your master's in swimming, then you get your PhD in swimming, and finally you go into the ocean and you drown, because of course you've never swam in the ocean. And it's exactly the difference between this encouragement of theorization of everything and the culture of research that doesn't want to find anything. I think a lot of pure theory people are terrified of finding, because finding would mean the end of research. Where my position is that we have found, and we have to apply what we have found. Actually, there's even a term for that. It's called reflexive research. So that's where you research, you find something, you apply that, and then you see what happens, and then you might do one more research to see what happens there. But it's in the application of theory and practice. I'm not just about practice, obviously. Design education has about 25-30% theory, but that needs to be reinforced by practice.
That's a really good point about learning how to swim from books. I went to college to learn how to be an elementary teacher. And most of my college career was sitting and listening to lectures and reading books and learning from other people. And tiny little bit was actually practicing being active in a classroom teaching. So yeah, there was a lot of even with learning how to teach was learning how to teach from a book versus getting out and being in the world and teaching actively.
Yeah, we did a similar degree actually. I did the in-practice. You did the there's two modes of that. Absolutely. But this is also it's a hard one.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
So it sounds kind of more like a technical apprenticeship versus with a hands-on.
Yes. I mean, art and the biggest problem was when art and education went into the university, because we were and we are a college apprenticeship really, where you learn from people that are doing it, and you keep on doing it. And I mean, it used to be, for example, typography used to be a 7-year apprenticeship. You went into a typesetting workshop and you stayed there for 7 years. And then you were a master typesetter. You were a graphic designer. But, of course, I'm not advocating, for example, photography, was a large carriage with a large horse, and to take one camera, you had to take a large. I'm not advocating that, but we have to combine. Actually, in this year's Virtual Design Education Forum, there's a talk about letterpress and how what you learn from the physical, from typesetting physically, you can then take to digital. And it's that conversation that I'm talking about right now, is that there's no dialogue. There's a group that's just proposing pure digital, and then the digital, there's no dialogue. It's just this perfect, no friction, no accidents, no happy accidents. It's just this perfect environment of zeros and ones. So what I'm propagating is dialogue between digital and physical, that the intersection of which there's some very interesting things happening. And right now in photography, for example, in filmmaking, people are going back to the analog older lenses. In music, they're going back to older recording equipment and analog recording, because people have realized that digital can be too perfect, can be too unified.
Interesting. So what is the social rebellion that you're doing with your work?
Absolutely. I mean, the conversations we're having, of course, in my teaching, every chance I get, we're going outside the areas, and of course we're talking about and we're doing things. For example, in one of the environments, I created a whole new class of drawing, and that class was drawing for design, and I was actually able to introduce a whole class of drawing in an area where there wasn't any. And it's something that was extremely successful. It wasn't but it never chance of pushing the boundaries, whether within the curriculum and within the areas that within the constraints. At the same time, Design Education Podcast is really one of the few honest voices that has a conversation, and that comes out almost twice a month. Education talks, and that's sort of an open and honest conversation. And some of those conversations, in a systemic environment, would be considered quite open.
Yeah, I've listened to a few of the episodes, and there's open conversation about how education looks and how it could change and be improved upon. So I've enjoyed listening to you and your guests that you talk to.
Oh, fantastic. Well, the current one that's coming out, the Alex, the Burton, is really out there. I mean, it's not everyone is quite unique. Every podcast is quite unique and different. It's not because the guests are selected for their practice-based real world experience. Even those that are more theoretical have had a healthy dose of real world experience. So the guests are selected that they have a passion for teaching, passion for design education, and real world experience, and that is the mix that creates those interesting answers.
What are some of the obstacles that you've come across trying to make these changes into the curriculum?
Yeah. Well, look, the biggest obstacles is right now that we're living in a kind of a two world, and there's the world that was used to be doing things, in the previous way. For example, education was designed by the Prussians when they lost the war to Napoleon in the 19th century to create obedient scribes and accountants and soldiers. So the education systems in school was created for a 19th century environment. Problem is, we are in the 22nd century, and that environment doesn't exist anymore. So the problems start in early years, in school. In university we try to help, but the real change can be made in primary early years. So there's two worlds really: is those that want to keep on repeating the old world of education, and the new world of education, which requires individuality, it requires expression in order to survive. It requires knowing how to learn, and not just following. So the paradigm has changed. So there are those who support the old paradigm, and that paradigm, of course, is having more and more problems. That's why we see that every day. We see that they're having more and more challenges. And the new paradigm is the new universities that are coming up. There is a growing movement in education. There's many voices that will of course become louder and louder, because it is necessary just to survive, to knowing how to learn right now, just to survive, because everything is changing and everything is being disrupted. The disruption will give birth to the new paradigm, but I think some of us are there before to help even more.
Yeah. And so in that, how are you rewriting the rules for education and shaking things up?
Yeah, the idea. Look, I mean, right now, as you know, we're doing it in small steps. But the idea is to create a school. So once that school is created, then we'll be able to do it in full scale.
So now you're doing it within an existing system, and you'd like to create
We're
a new
doing within
system.
an existing system, and of course we are finding ways and creating, organizing the like-minded people, like-minded individuals, which you're going to see more on, especially this year's. I mean, every year, but this year's every year seems to be getting better. The Virtual Design Education Forum, this 2-day event that will have the like-minded people that are going to be talking about these things.
So is it that your forum is where you're creating your pirate crews for this?
Yes, we need to create a tribe, and these like-minded people, once they recognize each other, then it'll multiply the effect. But I am proposing mainly a physical. It has got to be a physical school.
That that resonates with me. A couple of years ago, I started realizing where the language that I was using in my head really had an impact on my teaching. And once I started reframing and realizing, like, if I'm taking care of myself first, I was doing a lot better with the kids in my class. And started to realize, like, if the adults are taking care of themselves, if the adults are reframing how they see the world, it affects the kids. And in that, I started thinking about, if we could have schools that taught the kids these tools of the individual, learning at a young age, from like all the way up through high school, through college, university, they would be, I mean, they would be taking on the world and changing everything in no time. But
Absolutely.
yeah, but I've had a dream of seeing a reform in education.
But I mean, this is already happening in a sense that teaching cannot be any more authoritarian, from the authority top, like a pyramid system. It's got to be a collaborative experience, for example. When the mind, if it's authoritarian and the kids are afraid, very well, the reptilian system of the brain takes over, and there's flight or flee. There's no learning when there's fear in the classroom. So the systems that used to teach through fear achieve no learning whatsoever. But this is still not general knowledge. these very matter of fact, common facts are not general knowledge. So you cannot be using fear to teach, for example.
Yeah. Oh. I went to Catholic school. There was a lot of fear used to teach.
And as a teacher too, getting frustrated, like if I'd get frustrated and overwhelmed, the fear part comes out, like, you need to stop doing that right now. And they weren't responding to me that way. It was when I started being calmer in the classroom and listening to them and providing them that safe space, that the behaviors transformed to, they were listening, they were having fun, they wanted to do what was going on, versus rebelling against me because I'm mad and upset. So absolutely. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I mean, you've taken some bold actions here, and you mentioned a little earlier about some small actions. So what are actions you're currently taking? I know you've got your forum and your podcast. What are some of your current bold actions you're taking?
Well, organizing the forum is a significant bold action, because it requires a tremendous amount of work. And this is I mean, the podcast, the forum, to keep all this up, and of course taking action in my teaching as well. This is what has been happening. And of course, talking about sort of the greats like John Taylor Gatto in education, and of course right now exploring Friedrich Frobel, who invented the kindergarten, and sort of talking about people that are not very much talked about. That there's no point in reinventing the wheel. That's what I'm saying, is that we have the knowledge. We have the people that have done it, but we choose to ignore them. The problem is, well, we don't need to do any more research. We have everything. People have come. Rudolf Steiner said, do not teach anything to kids before the age of 7, just art, music, dance, because their minds are not developed yet. He said that over 115 years ago. But we still try to teach division to 5-year-olds. They can learn that at 7. They learn in 3 days, but they learn at 5, and they feel useless, and they have all these bad emotions, and that's like creating trauma right there.
Yeah. Kids 0 to 7. I mean, everybody learns best through play. I'd say even adults do. But that whole thing with kindergarten was meant to be play as an introduction into school. And I taught young 5s, so they were the kids that missed the kindergarten cutoff, but I was teaching them some kindergarten material. And yeah, that you're right. There was a lot of that need already for the perfectionism of, I'm not doing this right. I'm unable to write my name, or I'm unable to recognize the alphabet, and learning that perfectionism before they even entered school, where really truly what they're meant to be doing is play. They'll learn through the play, and the more play they get, the easier it's going to be for them to pick up on the learning later.
Absolutely. I mean, in the UK, there's a test called the 11 plus, and they tell kids that's going to define your whole life. And it's like, really? But they give them that impression, and then of course the kids absorb all that. It's, oh my God, this test is going to define my whole life. Whereas our life is defined by every breath we take every day, but nobody tells them this. And we got to have an honest conversation with the kids, with the students, no matter what the age. But of course, the work is easier when it's done earlier, and it's much harder to undo. For example, I receive students with grade anxiety. They have, their whole life is dependent on this number. And once I tell them that, in my whole life as a designer, nobody's asked me about my grades. I just want my portfolio. And it's like, but I have to cure them of grade anxiety. It's hard because they've been, for until they're 18 or so, they've been programmed that, especially now, even getting even worse with the GPAs. And when I realized that with my grades at school, I wouldn't get into the same university I got in when I got in there, because they were talking more about art, design, and what you had up here. So they weren't looking about grade. But the current GPA, I wouldn't qualify. There's a big problem when we are rejecting artists and designers that might be dyslexic, that might not be measured that might not have the best GPA in the world, but that does not mean that they're not good for art or design. When I make these realizations, it gives me even more energy and courage to keep on going and to be talking about these things, because right now, even though we're so much connected, there seems to be a monologue. There's no dialogue. Everybody seems to be saying the same thing, and there's no information anymore. Nobody's learning anything. So the dialogue is to be really asking these hard questions that don't require much funding to solve. They just require some basic action.
And what are those hard questions that need to be asked?
Well, we've been talking about that. That we got to be teaching kids in a different way. We got to be creating schools according to kids' learning styles. Not everybody learns the same way. In Norway, they have 3 or 4 different schools, and they take it according to each kid's learning style. They take them to a different school, so not everybody learns in the same way. This current system is good for maybe 20% of the students, but the other 80% are measured on the same, with the same methodology. It's like trying to measure an elephant with how high the elephant can jump. Everybody's not the same. So that is what that's got to be created, and there are systems and there are solutions that just have to be applied more widespread.
Yeah, it really makes sense what you said about, like, for art and design school, or to continue your education, and they're looking at GPA. So what does your math scores have to do with how well you're going to how well of an artist you are. So that makes a lot of sense.
Absolutely. And it's getting worse.
Really?
Yeah, it's a way to exclude. And the only way to open up the conversation is maybe to talk about some kind of maybe disability. And then you go into the disability area. But it's not this disability. Mm-hmm. It's like saying, dyslexia, or dyspraxia. The president of the Dyslexia Society has said that dyslexia doesn't exist in the UK. It's just a different way of learning. Mm-hmm. Dyslexia is a different kind of intelligence. Mm-hmm. I've taught dyslexic students. I've taught all kinds of with so-called learning disabilities. They're not. They don't have a disability. Mm-hmm. They just have a different way of learning. Mm-hmm. In fact, they're getting even more intelligent in other ways. So the fact that we say, okay, you have a disability or you have a learning difficulty, we give them all this difficulty, disability, and we stick these labels on these kids. It's making their life harder instead of saying, no, you have a different way of learning.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, labels. I have a thing against labels. That's another one where I've had students whose parents were like, do you think they have ADHD? And I'm like, they're 5, they're a kid. Yeah, or different. And when you put that label on whatever it is, dyslexic, ADHD, well, there's multitudes of them now. It puts the kid in a box where they now look at themselves as, I'm not normal. I'm not as good as that kid who has no label. And yeah.
Drugs.
Oh yeah. And the drugs that they're now on for the rest of their life. And yeah, so much. Yes. I'm on a rebellion against any labels.
Absolutely. It's not helping. It's not helping. It's just the more, another thing, I create a relaxed atmosphere. That's another thing. You have to create a relaxed atmosphere because, again, there's so much demand. I mean, these kids now, recently, my students now have been through this COVID, sort of situation. And it's been traumatic for them, So, for example, they might have a different kind of situation in their homes. Different, maybe their family is having other difficulties. So, they have gone through so much stress and mental stress. So the idea is to create a relaxing environment. You cannot have the same demands right now, for example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can imagine, especially with anything to do with art, like you need to be in that down-regulated, relaxed state in order to get into any sort of like flow state to create. Because I know for myself, when things are even, more stressful or I have more anxiety, the last thing I'm feeling is creative in any way, right? So it's really important to be able to have that, like I said, that down-regulated, relaxed environment.
There is a kind of creative anxiety, but it's a different kind. It's a different kind of anxiety. It's the kind of the one when you have to do something in order to go, or you're compelled. And ideally, in an art and design environment, you have to embody and live and breathe that. It's quite demanding.
Yeah, with the coaching work that I do, I work with some musicians, and we talk a lot about like that performance anxiety and that feeling of that need for perfection. And, even just by implementing some breath work to help to down regulate, I know my clients are feeling more relaxed in that performance because when they're stressed and they're like so anxious that they're shaking, that makes it really hard to get into a flow in a piece of music to actually connect and perform.
I mean, the Bauhaus, people are talking about the Bauhaus now, but do they really want to know about the Bauhaus? The Bauhaus, they had nutrition, they had meditation, for a while. It was part of, you cannot be creative unless you look at what you're eating, look at your breathing. Practice, have some kind of practice with breath work in order to increase your awareness, of course. And this was part of the Bauhaus for a while, but that part, it's not being talked about. There's a huge conversation in the European Union about the new Bauhaus, but do they really want to know? Do they really want to go that way. But no, but it's just about academics, just about theory, it's just about a very dry way of dealing with it. But it was a kind of a community, which went, of course, at the time went beyond. It was a community. Everybody was existing together, so it was very different. And the fact that we have all these separations now. I mean, another difficulty is in many countries, students have to work a lot when they're a student. So they're actually working and studying. They're working 2 or 3 days a week. So it's very difficult right now for them to be fully doing something, because they can learn something through work, they can learn something through education, but it's very difficult to be working and have the anxiety of working a lot and studying. They're not able to focus in that way.
Yeah, puts an additional financial pressure and stress as well.
Absolutely.
when you have to work. I know, did that. That
So
sounds like
we're asking more and more and more of these kids, and they're ever so stressed right now. And of course, the job market is shifting every single day right now. So we have to give them. That's what I'm saying. We have to give them more. That's the revolutionary act right now. Or at least, when you show them that you care, and that I give extra tutorials, I give extra time for contact outside, like on Zoom. Yeah. Because they know, very few take it, but I think because they know they can do it, it gives them more. It puts them, it makes them more relaxed, because they know they can arrange some extra tutorial time with me.
Have you noticed a shift since making the changes from like your beginning time as teaching to now that you've made these changes? Have you noticed shifts in how the students you have now are versus how they were before?
A very good question. I think the changes are primarily inside me, in the sense that I can better evaluate the energy of the class, the makeup of the class, and that's the most important. There's in teacher ed, they talk about lesson plans and learning outcomes, and if the formation that goes out the window, because if you have with the makeup of the class, different makeups of different classes of different nationalities of different circumstances require immediate adaptation. So I think I've become better in perceiving the makeup, the dynamics of a particular class, and adapting on the fly, on the spot, my teaching according to the makeup of the class. You have to look at the kids. You can. Once I attended a seminar, which was like and the guy went in. I mean, he was speaking to students in one of my workplaces. I couldn't understand what he was talking about. He was talking to himself for an hour and a half. There's no point. You have to consider your audience. You have to consider who is there, what do they need in order to take the next step, and really cover all the gaps, make sure that there's no gaps in their learning. So teachers cannot be teaching to the unknown audience or talking to themselves. They need to be really looking, who is standing opposite me? Who do I have here? I do not have my classmates from when I was a student, because my classmates from when I had more opportunities and went through a better system. I have these specific kids with these specific challenges in their lives. So I need to adapt my teaching. And I think that's the greatest learning that I can take away, over these past 12 years. And of course, we always have, there's always doubts and challenges, but of course there is a greater certainty at the same time.
Yeah, you need to meet the students where they're at. Yeah, we talk about that a lot in coaching as well. We're going to meet our clients where they're at, and we're not trying to talk to them at this level when they're here right now, right? We need to come together, and so that the message can be delivered and understood at the right level. So yeah, I like what you're saying. So will you tell us some more about your upcoming design education forum? I know you talked a little bit about it, but
okay.
Yeah, tell us more about
I
it.
mean, the best way for a full experience is to go on the website, and I'll be releasing the full program very soon. But
Okay.
the format, of course, is that there are some keynote speeches. So that means that these are these longer presentations that last. I mean, it's very different to doing a physical event to a virtual event. Some people are taking the same amount of time and putting it virtually. You cannot talk for the same amount of time, basically. You got to talk for a lot less. So where a keynote might be an hour to an hour and a half, right now is half an hour maximum keynote. Then there are presentations with 10 minutes, very short. But of course, these could be 40 minutes, but they are condensed to 10 so that people don't get tired. And the most important is that every 4 speakers, there are panels. So all the speakers from that group go into a panel and answer live questions. So because also I'm using the Hopin platform. I'm not getting sponsorship. I'm paying the Hopin platform. They're not paying me. No. They're good ones. Good one. It creates a live, the simulation of a live event. People can network. They can ask live questions. And so the panels are a great opportunity to sort out any questions that have arisen up to that point. And there's at least one confirmed workshop, which is being done by taking the participants to a different room, to a digital room, because we had in the first event we had were physical workshops where people went in the same area of the conference, and for a while and they went somewhere else for the duration of the workshop. Right now we're going to have workshops that people can go and attend during the slots of the event, but they go separately to a different area. But the most important thing is the panels. In the panels, in my experience, is where something more spontaneous comes up. Because some of the talks are live, some are pre-recorded. Some people have chosen to go pre-recorded, which is fine, but they're right there in the panel live to answer anything that comes up. And that's where the more spontaneous things come up. Also, I mean, I can share all these links with you at the end. People can watch fully the last year's event. And on the first year in 2019, we did have the first pre-COVID. We had just a webcam, and the full 9-hour video. That people can watch the first one as well.
Yeah,
so we were pioneering. We had simultaneous YouTube transmission in 2019.
so you were ahead of the COVID game.
Well, it was really exciting, the first one, because the physical event, we got together, and the speakers and people, the eating together and having lunches, and it was a different atmosphere, of course.
Yeah, much more connection.
Yeah. But I mean, last year's event was very successful in terms of content, because we don't take people. We're not doing research, we're doing papers, we're not. It's not about that. It's what we're looking for from our participants is direct, applicable solutions to challenges. So somebody can take something from the forum and apply it the next day. That's what the forum is about. It's not something that yes, we got this, we'll do more research. No, we're going to take something and right now and they do this, and they can have it as a takeaway and apply it in their teaching the next day, in the teaching and learning the next day. So that's what the forum is about. And it's going to be, again, I can give you access to the full program, but it's going to be very, very interesting this year.
That's cool. Yeah. I'd love to hear too from the education standpoint. I'm very curious about getting to hear new standpoints and what other people are saying. So
yeah, I mean, last year's was excellent, and the whole thing is live. You can watch it from the program. Have a link where you follow it through with the program and the videos for free. It's open and it's live. It's on video, and people can go through the form last year, the whole thing, including our panels.
Nice. Is it available then still after the forum for people to
see? This year we've had to put some tickets because of the cost of the platform and other expenses that came up. So there's a symbolic cost to the participant. And of course, they can watch it afterwards. But it's a live event. So it's recommended that, the difference between participating live, because they can actually ask questions and engage in what's happening. So it is a live event, even though it has some of the smaller presentations are pre-recorded, just to save time, and some of the participants want it like that. But it's almost like a blended live event. I mean, even if I was doing a physical event, I would still be doing it blended. There would still be online the accessibility online.
Yeah. So then where can our listeners go to find out more about you and all of the things you've been up to?
Yes, of course. I mean, our website is newartschool.education. And there are many more links. We are on iTunes, on YouTube, on Spotify, on Google Podcasts, for Design Education Talks podcast, and we're almost at 60 recorded episodes, and there's a tremendous amount of material there. On Designer Talks podcast as well. That's on the Chartered Society of Designers website for the video, and on Designer Talks podcast on audio and iTunes, and again the same platforms for the podcast that talks about the personalities of the designers. And it has different focus. There's different focuses on the personality and on very, very established designers talking about their life, which is really, really useful.
Very cool. And how would you recommend to our listeners who want to start their own pirate journey or their own pirate life? What's your recommendations?
Okay. They need to read the books.
Yeah. Good place to start.
And also how to be more pirate. That's the first and the second. No, I mean, what you're saying exactly is by doing small things. You got to start small, but it starts with a vision. It's like in education, kids right now are thinking, okay, what can I do to make money? It's not about that. Anything you can do can make money, but nobody tells them this. If you're passionate about it, money is a not direct outcome. It's a consequence of doing something you enjoy. Nobody tells them this. So small, but with a vision. It's the vision that makes you want to do the small changes. You have a vision and you live the vision. It's almost like it's already happened. Sort of live with that vision, and that gives you strength to keep on making greater and greater changes gradually. It doesn't happen in one day.
Yeah, great advice.
Well, we have one final question, and it's our favorite question. And the question is, do you know any pirate jokes?
I did read the question. I'm so sorry. Long and hard.
Would you like to hear a pirate joke?
Oh, please, yes, please.
Okay. So, where do pirates buy their hooks? The second-hand store.
Very good. That's very good.
That one's kind of funny, actually.
Yeah. The cheesier, the better.
Cheesier, the better. Well, this has been great having you on and talking to you about everything that you're doing here with design and art education. So thank you for joining us. I know it's late in the evening for you in Spain.
Fine. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a great pleasure.
Yes.
It's fantastic to have an opportunity to talk about these things.
Yeah, thank you.
It's rock and roll, guys. There are no rules. This one goes to 11.